Welcome to our Meet the Candidates interview series. We now have Don Jones running for East Anchorage. How you doing?
Oh, we're doing good, doing good. It's been an exciting time, so.
All right, so let's get right to it. What makes you the most qualified candidate for this assembly seat?
Well, I think, my background is that I come from as a 27-year military guy, now retired. We learned very early on that, you look at problems and you put solutions to them. And sometimes that's as simple as putting the best people around the table, come up with that plan, and then put that plan into place. And what I saw this year is that Anchorage certainly had our fair share of challenges, whether it was roads, trying to get plow outs, that kind of stuff, or whether it was the crime issue that's been throughout Anchorage, very prominent throughout Anchorage. So I think I can bring those solutions to that, or offer some solutions to those problems that might be a little different than my opponent.
All right, so if you are elected, voters agree with you, they choose you.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your first action as an assembly member? What's the first issue you want to address?
Well, I think we have to address and take on head-on is the crime issue. And that comes down to prosecuting criminals, really. We have added police, obviously, to the police force, the mayor has. I think how we employ those police may be discussed as far as community policing, or as far as getting them back involved in an area that they're familiar with. But it really does no good for them to catch criminals if it's almost like a catch and release program, which, they're catching them, taking them in, booking them, and they're back on the streets before the ink dries. And this is what we're hearing from some of the police officers. It's really getting frustrating. So we've got to have consequences for the actions of those criminals, and that does mean jail time.
Did you get a chance to look over the budget the Muni just passed, the Assembly just passed, this next one?
I have not looked over all of the budget, but I do know the issues in there, at least some of the issues in there. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the budget they just passed, what you know of it? Are there things you would have done differently?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think that the priorities for what the city is supposed to focus on, what any city is supposed to focus on, is that of roads and infrastructure. We've got to have good infrastructure here if we're going to grow the economy, if we're going to offer businesses places to come into. We have to focus on the crime element. These are our police and firemen, because without focusing on public safety, in an unsafe city, people don't want to live, and they will move out. Companies will not build. And then, of course, it comes down to the schools issues, and stuff, because we need an educated workforce. So, we want good schools. So in building those, I think coming at those three issues, obviously in our city too, we have bond issues that we have out there, debt that we have to focus on and work on retiring. We should retire more debt. I'm a guy that says we should retire more debt than we put on. But because it frees up money to give back into those efficiencies that we talked about police and fire, about schools, and about our roads and infrastructure. If we can do that, I think our economy can turn around, and we will see businesses wanting to build here and people wanting to stay in Anchorage. It makes housing more affordable. Everything does better that way.
Would you support a sales tax, perhaps, to diversify our tax base, take some of the burden off of property owners?
Well, what I want to look at is efficiencies across the board, and I think if we balance out the budget, if we're able to balance out the budget and focus on our needs, not so much our wants, and by that I mean infrastructure, police and fire, or public safety, and education. If we focus on those needs and get that in line, I think that frees up money for us to actually maybe come back to the taxpayer. At that time, we need to sit down and, if there's excess funds, we need to sit down and have a discussion about what do we want to do with those funds at that time.
Are you talking about refunding them?
We could. Last year, the city ended up keeping, I think it was around $15 million that was outside the tax cap. You know, we cannot continue to put the burden on the taxpayer to coming into those wants versus needs. You know, we have to get within our budget. We have to stay within our budget and focus on what a city is supposed to, what is a government really supposed to be doing for the people.
Moving on to homelessness. What grade would you give the Muni on how we're dealing with the homelessness issue in Anchorage right now?
Well, I'm not focused so much on the grade for the homelessness piece. I mean, I come around back to it from a standpoint of the crime element, because our homeless have been affected by crime too. I don't know that we need more government programs to deal with those pieces when we're not taking care of the crime issue. Because as we said, our homeless individuals have been affected greatly by the crime. They're probably some of the first victims of that crime. And so looking at that, I think we got to come back to doing what our priorities are, which is that infrastructure and roads, the crime issue, you know, dealing with the crime issue, looking at education. If you do those things, then the homeless, you know, it lifts the city to create more jobs. It improves the economy, and thus more homeless are able to work. More affordable housing as well is offered. You know, everybody does better all the way around.
I think some people might argue that homelessness won't just go away, even if these other things are improving. Do you think the Muni is doing too much right now,
well,
as far as working with the homeless?
Well, I think the homeless issue is a complicated issue, first of all. But, you know, coming from a military background, we have seen soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, who transition out of the military and have a very hard time from the issues that they've had to deal with during combat. And a lot of that can lead to homelessness. It really comes back to, do we have affordable housing here in Anchorage? Are we balancing our budget? Is Anchorage an affordable place to live? Because if not, we're going to just increase the number of homeless persons out there, single moms, kids, you know, it runs the gamut.
I think you've touched on this already, but let's go more in depth with public safety. Mayor Berkowitz wants to have 56 more police officers this next fiscal year. Do you think there are ways the Muni can address our public safety issues other than or in addition to hiring more officers? Yes,
we did touch on that a little bit. I mean, it comes back to, I would rather see some of that funding go into the prosecution of these individuals, the criminals, that is. The number of police, we can have as many police officers as we want. But if we don't arrest that criminal who stole a car with a small child in it, if we don't arrest that criminal who held a person up at gunpoint, you know, or came into a restaurant and robbed patrons as well as the restaurant, you know, like they did in Denny's. If we don't prosecute those individuals when we catch them, they're just going to continue to do it. And no amount of police officers is ever going to turn that around. So it really comes back to giving our police the tools, if you will, to, and the reasons to catch these guys, if you will, okay? So that they're not frustrated seeing the same guys, almost like a catch and release, which is what it shouldn't be, but that's the way some of the police feel like, because they're catching these guys, seeing recidivism, same criminals that they just let out, that just stole. Let's look at cars, for example. Auto thefts last year, over 2,100 auto thefts last year. This year, we're on record to maybe break that record. 275 in the last 30 days, 661. I know you know the numbers because you guys are reporting on it. That's where, you know, where we're hearing about it. And it's astounding to me that, you know, we're literally, even if we catch the person with a stolen car, we are letting them loose so that that night or the next day they're back stealing another car. And that to me is just inconceivable. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
You're referring to Senate Bill 91.
And
Correct.
some of it is Senate Bill 91, yes. Some of it is prosecution, and we do have to push back on Senate Bill 91. As an assembly, we can do that, I think, with Juneau and let Juneau know we are the largest city in the state. We have to tell Juneau what's going on here, and there have to be changes to that for the prosecution end, yes.
The mayor has said he will not allow our police department to round up refugees for the Immigration Service, even under the threat of losing federal funds. Do you agree or disagree with that position?
I disagree with that position, and here's why. We're in a fiscal crisis right now, okay? No one can dispute that. The state's in a fiscal crisis right now. They're trying to figure out how to balance the budget. If we become a sanctuary city, if we directly conflict with federal guidelines and federal laws to the point of losing federal funding, it's across the board. We lose federal funding for schools, we lose federal funding for police, we lose federal funding for fire. I don't think we're in a position that we can afford to do that when we're already running over our tax cap, when the mayor's already outside that tax cap in costs.
Last question for you.
Yes.
Do you think Anchorage should find a way to allow ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft to start operating here in Anchorage?
I do. If you travel outside the city of Anchorage, if we travel outside Alaska, as many of us have, Uber and Lyft are a huge benefit to being able to get around a city and get in and out. And in many places where I've seen Uber and Lyft operate, I've also seen taxi cabs operating. So I'm not saying at the cost of one or the other, but I heard a taxi cab operator say that she worked hard and had worked all week and gave something along the lines of $13,000 to her medallion owner and to her leaser, so that this is how much money she'd earned them. And I thought, wow, a single mom working hard, what would she do if she got to keep that $13,000 if she could drive for herself? So to me, Uber and Lyft make absolute sense.
Okay. Don Jones running for the open seat in East Anchorage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Right.
All right.
Best of luck.
Thank you.